Thanks for that daily dose of what's going on during the Cannes Film Festival there. It's time for the France 24 debate. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Those are the reported words of one of the two suspects confronted by a passerby after hacking to death a British soldier near the Woolwich barracks in London. He was talking about Iraq and Afghanistan. The words were spoken with a London accent. Homegrown terrorism back in the news after Wednesday's attack, followed by a shootout that has both suspects in hospital. This morning, French radio correspondents on the scene described how Britain's experiencing its own Toulouse, an allusion to last year's rampage by Mohamed Merah, the son of Algerian immigrants, that ended in a bloody siege. Like with Woolwich and the 2009 Fort Hood shootings in Texas, Merah's first targets were soldiers. What's the agenda for these homegrown jihadists? How to stop them? And on that score, multicultural Britain and assimilationist France seem to follow radically different approaches to different disenfranchised minorities. We'll be broaching that subject as well. Today in the France 24 debate, homegrown terror, is it a predictable trend? And with us to talk about it from the UK capital, Brooke Rogers, who lectures in Risk and Terror at King's College London. Welcome back to the debate.
Thank you.
We welcome from Madrid, Frank Foley, who is the author of Countering Terrorism and in Britain and France. Thanks for being with us. And here in the studio, sociologist Farhad Khosrowkavar, author of Inside Jihadism and the New Arab Revolutions that shook the world. Thank you for being with us here, as well as France 24's very own Georgia Calvin-Smith, who covered the Toulouse standoff of 1 year ago. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. It's the first Islamist killing in Britain since 4 local suicide bombers killed 52 across London back in July 2005, an attack that comes 1 month after the bombing of the Boston Marathon.
If you to remain here, please move back.
You can come early. Look at the guy's dead now. That's the time you coming. You take it 30 minutes to come.
Which one's dead?
Yeah, the British soldier is dead.
As David Cameron confirms that the man killed in yesterday's brutal machete attack was a British soldier, Londoners are trying to come to terms with what happened and question how a man can be butchered to death in broad daylight. Witnesses describe how the victim was driven into by 2 attackers in a blue car. They then set upon him with a meat cleaver. They encouraged bystanders to film them while they waited for police to arrive.
Just saying the most randomest things that anyone could ever say, saying that men are not going near the body, only women, saying this is what God would have wanted, and then they was telling people to video record them doing it, and then the police come back 5-7 minutes later.
We must fight them as they fight us. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I apologise that women had to witness this today, but in our land, our women have to see the same. You people will never be safe. Remove your governments, they don't care about you.
Witnesses describe how they thought the killers were initially trying to help the man before it became clear they were in fact continuing to attack him.
And as we drove round here, I see 2 geezers leaning over another geezer, and I thought they were trying to resuscitate him because I thought he was the one in the accident. So like we parked my car in the garage and we started walking up, and as we started walking up there was a lorry there already parked there and a little car come along, and he got out and he said call 999 or something like that, and next minute he's pulled the gun out from behind the back of him.
Police marksmen brought down the 2 attackers and they're now being treated separately in hospital. David Cameron has said that he will not comment on the investigation as it's ongoing, but praised the actions of bystanders at the scene. Women had surrounded the man's body to prevent further blows, and one woman confronted the attackers, telling them that they won't start a war in London, it is you against many. The Prime Minister said she spoke for us all.
We'll be hearing from that woman what she had to say a little bit earlier on Breakfast Television. First, though, Brooke Rogers, it's a bit bizarre. They carry out this attack and then they seem to just sort of hang around.
It is a new trend, but I think that it very much shows the type of information that they've been exposed to in terms of the new media and the way in which the new media is used. I think that it does have undertones, perhaps, of an intended suicide attack where they did not expect to come out of it alive. They were injured, but they have come out of this alive. I think that they very much embraced the new media, the technology that was around them, and expected members of the public to film them doing this in order to help spread their message.
Yeah, to hammer that home, we can hear from that woman, the undoubted hero of the day, a mother of two, confronted the men at a bus stop right after the attack. As The Guardian put it, Ingrid Loyot-Kennett's only formal preparation for this moment seems to have been a course in first aid for her work as a Girl Scout brownie leader.
But you're not scared for yourself in that situation?
No.
Why not?
Better me than a child, because unfortunately there were more and more mothers with children stopping around by, so it was even more and more important that I talked to him and then I asked him what he wanted, because I thought, well, usually they want something, a car, or what would you like? And I was
so just
in
trying
between.
to engage him in that.
That's right. And I was expecting the police to arrive as well. And I saw the bus moving, and I thought, he's going to leave without me. So I asked the guy last time, is there anything I could do with him for him? And he said, no, I just want to shoot the police. So police comes, I shoot them. And so I said, okay. And I left thinking that by then the police should be around somewhere.
Truth is stranger than fiction, Georgia Calvin-Smith. This is this sort of these parallel universes meetings kind of this situation.
I think that one of the aspects that I suspect that we'll find is parallel between the Mohammed Merah killings in Toulouse and what happened yesterday in London is disenfranchisement. It's being tagged under the label of an Islamist killing. These people who used Islam as a justification for their own feelings of disenfranchisement, frustration for whatever problems they have in their lives. But I think when you look at the individual circumstances of the people who are responsible for this, you're going to find a common story of frustration, of feeling unheard, of feeling that there isn't much hope to achieve whatever it is that they set their ambitions on. Mohammed Merah, he was, this lone wolf kind of story that we see being played out again and again is reflected of, in Mohammed Merah's case, somebody who tried to join a variety of different communities and was constantly rejected.
That's a point I wanted to get back to, is what motivated them. But first, just the scene. Brooke Rogers there a minute ago saying how she had the feeling that they were probably going to thought this was going to be a suicide attack. They didn't expect to be there talking with passerbys. Frank Foley, do you think that woman confronting them and having that discussion with them through them perhaps sort of derailed what their original intent was?
I'm not sure about that, because I think these guys are unusual in terms, if they are inspired by Al-Qaeda or extremist ideas like that, they're unusual in that they did not necessarily have the intention to kill the maximum number of people possible, which has been a feature of Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorist attacks. They wanted to focus on soldiers. And it's remarkable, in fact, that they just stood there talking to these people. So they very much focused their message on soldiers. And this is a slightly different form of terrorism to what we're used to, which is random violence. So ironically, the effect of this is to perhaps make soldiers more fearful, but not necessarily to spread a lot of panic in the general public.
And let me put this to you, Farad Khosrow-Kavar. One of the suspects, reportedly 28 years old. The profile of these men, we hear them again in that report, speaking with London accents.
Mm-hmm. These are homegrown terrorists. They have been brought up in the country. In Europe, for instance, Merah was brought up in France, so he spoke French much more than Arabic. So that this doesn't prevent them. There's a path of radicalization based on this belonging and not belonging at the same time, being disenfranchised, feeling that you're rejected, and so on. So that's one of the major components in Europe, not in the United States. In the United States, it's much more complicated because there are many middle-class people who are involved, and they're rejected because of the American involvement in the Middle East, let's say it that way. So there are two different patterns in Europe and in the United States and Canada. Because in Europe, most of those who get radicalized and become jihadists are, I would say, disenfranchised, as you said. And at the background of that is the involvement of the, I would say, the countries, in a war against a Muslim country. For instance, Great Britain, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and nowadays France, for instance, in Mali. And that pushes them towards what is called defensive jihad. That means those people who kill Muslims should be killed. And that's why their main target are the military, those who wear, the uniform.
Which was the case at first, at least, with Mohammed Merah. The two suspects in this case in London reportedly making the link with UK involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq, a link that, by the way, the Mayor of London says he'll stand against.
It is completely wrong to blame this killing on the religion of Islam, but it is also equally wrong to try to draw any link between this murder and British foreign policy or the actions of British forces who are risking their lives abroad for the sake of freedom. The fault lies wholly and exclusively in the warped and deluded mindset of the people who did it.
Of course, that's not, it seems, how hardline Islamist preacher Anjem Choudary spins it. Choudary, who told the French news agency AFP he knew one of the suspects, describing him, by the way, as a quiet chap.
When he was attending our activities, he was calling to Islam, commanding good, forbidding evil, working to establish the Khilafah or the Sharia. And of course, he was very vociferous, as we all are, against the foreign policy. But suddenly, we're not advocating for people to carry out any operations in this country. And, if he did something like that, that's not something which he gained from association with us.
Brooke Rogers, do you see the hand of this radical imam in what happened, or do you see him in any way? He, by the way, has denounced the killing, but do you see him as somewhere responsible?
I think it would be very difficult to make a direct link with that specific radical imam at this point in time. We'll need to start looking at connections and conversations. In respect to the role that foreign policy can play and does play in a number of instances of violent radicalization, we find that quite often they can talk the talk, they repeat the rhetoric that they've seen, that they've heard, but that it's quite often just the tip of the iceberg in terms of their understanding of the actual international issues and the policies that they are saying that they are so aggrieved about. I do believe that they truly do feel aggrieved, but if you actually engage with these individuals and talk to them about it, quite often their understanding of the international policy issues that they are using to say that it's driving them towards violence, if they do claim that, their understanding can be quite shallow, and it can also be quite shallow in respect to their understanding of their own ideology.
You say that at this point, but reports we're getting now say that they had been on the radar of security services, that one of them had been stopped from going to Somalia even. So could they be part of a wider web?
Again, I just urge caution with all of the links that we can make, that we will make. I think it's going to take a number of weeks, maybe months, even years to go through all the data in terms of the electronic connections, the physical connections, and their activities. If they were on the radar, I'm sure that some of that information will be to hand. We do know that individuals can go out seeking information and seeking contact, but still receive very little guidance from outside sources or outside structures and organizations. We also know that some of them do receive training and some of them do have a bit of guidance here and there.
In the case of Mohammed Merah, the Toulouse attacker, he did go abroad, in fact. He went to the tribal areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and he somehow got under the radar.
Yeah, but he reached out to Al Qaeda and didn't get very far. So I think that in itself is a testament to perhaps another facet of frustration that these kind of people may be feeling, that they're trying to find some place to fit in. They don't know where they fit in the host country that they've grown up in. So they try and identify themselves elsewhere. Mohammed Merah reached out to Al Qaeda. He didn't get very far in being part of that kind of organization. The thing is, what's terrifying about organizations like Al Qaeda, like Boko Haram, is that there is a plan, there is a structure, and these lone wolves don't find a place in that. So they go off the radar and they decide to make their own, in my opinion, their own grand gesture to show that they are part of something that from their perspective, they're still on the outside looking in.
Frank Foley, what scares you more? Is it a big organization or a big brand name like Al Qaeda, or people who are, as Georgia was describing them, lone wolves?
I think the more important threat is an organization, a well-organized group that can conspire, that can do sophisticated plotting involving explosives. Ultimately, they can do something on the scale of 9/11. And then, as we've seen after that, do something on the scale of the Madrid bombings or the London bombings. What is less significant in political terms is these kinds of individual attacks, like the Fort Hood shootings, like this attack yesterday, like Mohammed Merah. And in fact, this trend towards sort of do-it-yourself terrorism, what some people call it, is in fact a reflection of the success of intelligence efforts, of the efforts of security forces. They've really stretched out their intelligence networks in an extensive way across many countries. And at the moment, Al-Qaeda-inspired individuals are reduced to this, which is hacking a man down in the street with a knife.
Do-it-yourself terrorism, but now with the internet, it's easy to figure out how to make a bomb. When you look at, for instance, the Boston attack on the marathon, it seems as though people can be more autonomous.
Yes, people can be more autonomous, and it's tragic for those who are caught up in these events. It's tragic for those who are killed in these events. But if we've come a long way since 9/11. Imagine we've gone from a situation where terrorism shot to the top of the international agenda. People were talking about terrorism having a strategic effect, changing the foreign policy calculations of governments. We've come a long way from then to where we are today, where, as I said, it's down to individuals, and they don't seem to be able to have as big a political impact as terrorism in the past has had.
All right, what's changed since 9/11? That's a point we'll pick up on when we come back with our panel. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.